Hi, welcome back to the Rod Chappell Show. This is the third and final segment on racial profiling. We have as our guest today Don Love, which is really just a real blessing, not only for the show and I hope for the community. A lot of the issues that we've been talking about touch on history, on our Constitution, and about who we really are as people, and more importantly, who we want to be. Don, we left off and we were talking about training a little bit. But before we get to training, there is another issue aside from the requested stops or the consent searches, right? And that's resisting arrest. How does that factor play out for blacks as against whites or the majority population?
Well, this will take us into training. It'll be a good segue for it.
Okay.
The vehicle stop report, which contains data for all the stops that all the officers across the state make, show that black drivers are much more likely to be involved in resisting arrest situations than anybody else. Statewide, I forget what the number is, but it's like a factor of 4 times more likely.
Just by virtue of being a person's color, they're 4 times as likely.
Yeah, I'd have to check that figure, but it's in some departments it's higher than that. Other departments, it doesn't seem to make any difference. The officers can handle situations without letting them get out of control. They're better at it, it would appear.
Right.
But overall, across the state, it's a problem.
And by the way, Don, if we wanted to find a copy of the vehicle stops report, there's almost a dozen years, well over a decade anyway, of stop report data. Where would we locate that at?
It's on the Attorney General's website.
Okay.
If you Google Missouri Attorney General, it'll give you the site, and then look around and you'll find the vehicle stop report listed there someplace. It changes position on occasion.
Sure.
It's going to be fairly easy to see because June 1st, the new data for 2014 is released.
Okay.
So you'll see it in the media and make it easier to find. If anybody wants to email you, Rod, I can make sure you've got something to send them.
Hey, that would be great.
For the first time this year, we got the complete data set for all those years going back to 2000.
Oh.
So we can look back and see what's happening on all these things across the state. And that's why I can say that looking at the complete statewide data, for one reason or another, black drivers are much more likely to be affected by resisting arrest.
Right.
Now,
and, go ahead.
You can't just say that, well, that's because officers are doing something wrong.
Right.
We have to take very seriously the likelihood that those drivers really are doing things that officers are fairly characterizing as resisting arrest and making the arrest on that charge. For that reason, we'd want to go back and look as carefully as possible about specific situations to satisfy ourselves that officers really are being even-handed when they do this, and that they're not treating people differently on the basis of race. But on the other hand, it's not that hard to believe that African Americans could be a little angry in a situation where they've been stopped.
Sure.
They feel like they were stopped unfairly. They've been stopped multiple times that year. They know their friends are stopped at a high rate. They're ticked off about recent events of black people being shot by police. There's a lot of anger out there right now, especially. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that there is a tendency for that anger to get out of control. It's good to know that in some departments, officers seem to be doing a good job in keeping things under control, not allowing that anger to get out of control.
Right.
Just letting the interaction with the driver end with a citation for speeding or whatever. But it's also, I think we need to keep in mind the possibility that some officers could benefit in training about how to de-escalate a situation where somebody begins to lose its temper. It's a skill that could be learned.
Right.
It could be a skill that is related to the experiences one has with cultural diversity.
Right.
It could be that the officers are much better about handling anger among someone of the same race or ethnic group as themselves. So that a white officer might have a hard time recognizing the anger until it gets out of control.
Right. Or maybe even appreciating the nature or context of that anger, because it's not necessarily that, a person is going to be mad and, start slamming their fist around or something crazy like that. But, there might be some language that may not be as respectful as the officer might appreciate, might involve an explicative, may show some level of disdain for the whole encounter based on that person's experiences. And maybe even having a lower threshold for what's going to be tolerated on a constitutional basis as an individual, as opposed to trusting that the system's actually going to work out and allowing things to play out as they otherwise would. Developing an ability to do that, I think, is entirely learnable or teachable.
Yeah.
And then, truthfully, it probably needs to go on both contexts, because we certainly need to respect law enforcement as peace officers. They have an important charge and important duty in the system. But at the same time, I think that they have probably a higher threshold. Would you put it like that, in terms of needing to be able to accept citizens where they are psychologically, right?
Yep.
And even if it's just in the context of one stop, as opposed to like, for example, a diagnosis, right? Because I'm sure that they run into a number of people who have mental illness issues that they have to address in a certain way.
It's a tough job being an officer.
It is.
And we certainly need to hold citizens accountable too.
Yes.
Citizens are responsible for keeping their anger under control.
That's right.
If it turns out that in this day and age, young black men are more likely to lose their temper, then we as a society need to do what we can to help them understand the importance of not losing their temper when they're dealing with officers.
Absolutely.
They need to understand unquestionably that officer has stopped them. They need to follow the instructions of that officer, even if they don't like it.
Right.
But on the other hand, if we can trust it's going to be a lot easier for them to do that if the officers have gotten better about de-escalating potentially violent situations.
That's right.
Can officers do that on their own? No, this is the sort of training that's going to have to be provided for them. Mm-hmm. And I think it hasn't been provided in the past, or not as well as it could, but there are a number of professionals out there who are working on this sort of issue. Two of my favorites are Jack Colwell and Chip Huth. Jack is a retired Kansas City officer. Chip is still on active duty. He's a SWAT team leader. He's extremely good at what he does. He's an expert on use of force. But the two of them have decided that what's really essential to good police work is that the officers start with respect for everybody that's in the community. Right. That officers tend to get into trouble if they dismiss someone as being a lower quality person, someone who is not really deserving of their respect. When you do that, you don't take someone seriously, and if you don't take them seriously, you're more likely to be vulnerable to their unpredictable responses.
Right.
But if you're looking at someone as a person and understanding who they are as a person, recognizing that or the signs of mental illness or drug impairment or lack of anger control, saying, this is a person like me.
Right.
This person's having a bad day.
Yeah, that happens.
What can I do here?
Right.
That we're asking a lot of officers to do that. Mm-hmm. Do we expect them to be psychologists? No, but there's some things they could learn that would make them more effective, protect themselves better, and protect the communities better too.
That's the truth. That's the truth. And that leads me to a couple of questions. One, do you think that cameras could have a better, would allow for a better or even a different outcome in some of these interactions? Not only because, we have some independent observation of the encounter and what happened, so we don't have to rely on the person who may be feeling victimized, whether that's the officer or the driver, but because it will help everybody remember is what I'm doing reasonable? And maybe that's a good question to start with. What do you think about that?
I think cameras are a good idea. A number of police departments do like them. They feel that their officers are doing a good job, and that in general the cameras will vindicate the officers if a complaint is brought against the officers. On the other hand, if the officers are doing something wrong, they want to know that and be able to intervene with the needed training as quickly as possible, and the camera helps them do that.
Absolutely. Don, I feel like we're making a piece of art here. Do you mind if we go just a little longer, maybe talk a little bit further here?
I gave up my afternoon to you, Ron.
Bless you, bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Well, and another question I had was kind of in line with the cameras. Now that we have tasers, right, that officers carry and can use, and it's pretty widely accepted, do you think that there's been a lower emphasis on the ability of an officer to de-escalate a situation because you have what has often been defined as a non-lethal method that will incapacitate a person?
Well, tasers are complicated. I think I was part of an effort in Colombia to make the police give up their tasers, and in fact make tasers illegal in Colombia.
Wow. Was that successful?
No, it failed.
Okay. Okay. Well,
it was a voter initiative.
Okay, sure.
And it gave us in Colombia a good chance to discuss it. Ken Burton, the police chief there, listened to the specific concerns the group had about police having tasers, and the group ultimately decided to go ahead and push for this voter initiative in spite of his response. But his response was encouraging to us.
Okay.
In retrospect, I'd say the way it played out was that tasers were made available because of a grant of money that the city had. The police chief at the time decided to take advantage of that money to get this, what seemed to be a useful tool for his officers. The big problem was that nobody told the officers they could kill people.
Oh.
The message the training had was that this is a non-lethal device that that's better to use than shooting people and better to use than hitting them on the head with a club. That it's a win-win here. People will not be injured.
That certainly how it's advertised.
You will not feel bad about injuring people.
Right.
But because they'd been told that, the officers used it in a way that had some bad results. There was a situation where someone with mental health issues was climbing on the chain link fence on a pedestrian overpass over Highway 70, and they'd tried various things to get the person to climb down, and eventually they used the tasers on the person. At that point, he was on the other side, the highway side of the chain link. He fell 30 feet or whatever it was onto, I think, not the actual traffic lane, but had significant injuries.
I can only imagine.
Tasers shouldn't be used in a situation like that.
Right.
That proper instruction would say, no, don't use them on someone who's running away from you.
Right.
Because immediately, if the electrodes come into place, you're just going to lose all muscle control immediately. You're going to fall without any chance of protecting yourself. You're going to experience unpredictable injuries.
Higher chance of head injury, I imagine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just thinking that, considering the possibility that 2 or more officers might pull their tasers at the same time and apply them repeatedly to someone brings a whole nother perspective to it.
Right.
There was a case in, I think, Moberly, probably 5 years ago, where someone died from tasers. And I may not have the details exact on this, but I think it was a situation where the officers were misusing the tasers by over-applying them.
Right. Just
keeping them, delivering the shock. And although the person looked young and healthy, that's no guarantee that the heart is going to be able to
withstand that kind of force.
something that might be okay for the way it's intended to be used, but becomes lethal when it's applied for a longer period of time or by more than one officer. You get those sorts of things.
Right.
So the group presented its concerns to the chief, and part of what we said is we want these policies that have been drafted by PERF, Police Executive Research Foundation, I think, or something similar than that, PERF. We think these, if Columbia adopts these specific policies on taser use, that things will be better. And Burton said, oh, yes, of course.
Oh.
If PERF says
Use
that's
these.
the way it should be done,
Right.
I respect PERF, and I'm pretty sure that we won't have a problem with any of this.
Well, that makes sense.
And he said at the same time that training's a problem. The officers haven't been trained well. We will accomplish that. It won't happen immediately, but you'll see in the next few months that fewer of these incidents are coming out, and eventually the use of tasers will be fairly rare, and in situations where it was the best choice for the officer to use them. And although I haven't gone back and looked specifically at the frequency of the use of the tasers, you don't hear anything about them anymore in Columbia, that the officers really do seem to have learned that tasers, well, I'm still suspicious of them.
Well, sure.
I'm very skeptical of these things, but still, it sure seems like the officers are doing a reasonable job of using them. They're
Yes.
keeping themselves out of trouble. Maybe they could handle those situations without them, but hey, the officers have to be given some latitude in making decisions for themselves out there.
Right.
We can't micromanage these men and women.
And it wouldn't
We
work.
need to give them the best training we can so that they're out there working as free agents to exercise good judgment in a way that benefits everybody. And we need to have more situations where we reach a level of trust that yes, they will behave reasonably.
And
if
Don,
they make a mistake, they're going to make a mistake. We need to cut them
Mistakes
some
happen.
slack.
Right.
That
Right.
boy, if you're doing the best you could under those circumstances, we shouldn't be jumping on you. But we keep in mind we have high expectations, and if you need more help with any of this, if you need more training, if you need more money, I'm in favor of better salaries. These people deserve.
Absolutely.
Columbia has.
We've heard a lot lately about a living wage. I
Yeah.
for one, that think that peace officers, teachers, those are two public officials or people who fill a public service need that are completely undervalued, right? For the
Healthcare providers.
Healthcare providers is another one.
Nursing home, particularly situation that.
Don't get me started, Don.
These people should get more than.
That's right.
Should get a living wage for the tough jobs they're doing.
They really should.
It's unfortunate we've gotten in a situation where a lot of officers that deserve respect aren't getting it. We need to fix that.
That's right.
The best way to do that is to have a heart-to-heart conversation between the people that feel like they're most vulnerable,
Right.
and the officers who are doing their best to provide the best law enforcement possible, and come to a mutual understanding where trust emerges.
That's right. And your example with the use of tasers in Columbia is a great analogy or a great story or guide for what any citizen or group of citizens throughout Missouri or the United States could do to address what they perceive to be a problem with local government and get a reasonable resolution, even if it's not the 100% field goal,
Yep.
that everyone would have liked.
We were surprised that Burton was so straightforward and so responsive.
Right.
But the more I know about what police chiefs are doing across the state, the less surprised I am that there are a whole lot of police chiefs in place now who are just as responsive as Burton is.
Yeah.
That I met the chief of Blue Springs, Wayne McCoy. I was particularly interested in him because the vehicle stop reports show that disparities that have decreased dramatically in a number of areas for the Blue Springs police department over the last several years, and it coincides with when he came in and started doing things differently. That he gets it.
Right.
The officers get it because he gets it.
Right.
They're doing a better job. Independence, likewise. St. Joe, new police chief last few years, came in from the East Coast, very interested in fixing problems that are there. Springfield, very good police chief, changing things. The chiefs in St. Louis and Kansas City and St. Louis County, I think, are equally well-intentioned, but those big police departments have a tremendous problem in changing the culture that's there.
I can only imagine.
The police chiefs are going the right direction. I think ultimately we will see things turn around, but it's going to take a period of time in which new skills and new attitudes are learned by the rank and file officers before we see a complete change. But the fact that the people at the top are saying the right things is something that can give us heart.
It makes a huge
Maplewood,
difference.
Joplin, a bunch of them out there are going the right direction, and I think in a lot of cases we'll see improvement. Ferguson was a problem in large measure, I think, because the community was poor, didn't have the economic base to fund a really professional police department. The officers, there weren't very many of them. They didn't get the sort of training they needed. The police chief didn't have the degree of experience or training that is comparable with what Burton and McCoy and these others have. Looking at the vehicle stop report for Ferguson, they don't look too bad. They're in line with, kind of the average of the state.
And that's to say that that if you're African American, you are what percentage more likely to get stopped?
Well, for the state, it's 1.66.
Okay.
The rate at which African Americans are stopped is 1.66 times that of white drivers. And I think it's higher than that for Ferguson, but still they're in line with a lot of other departments out there. The area where they I think it stands out of them being over their heads comes out for the crowd control situations.
Okay.
They could do a pretty good job making stops without doing things drastically wrong, but they had no clue about what to do with a crowd that's an angry crowd out there.
I see.
And that's not surprising for a small department.
Right.
Now, what do you do with a small department like that? Do you insist that they pay their officers more if they can't afford to? Should the state step in and give support to small departments like that? Or should small departments like that be disbanded and, in that case, the St. Louis County Police take over?
What?
Now, I don't have the answer to those things, but I think we're vulnerable as long as we expect small departments with marginal training to deliver the sort of professional police work that we've come to expect in the light of recent difficulties.
Right. No, I think you're right. And those are important considerations. With an African American, a black person, or a person of color in the state of Missouri getting stopped 1.6 more times than a majority person or a white person, that's more than 1.5 times that each person's going to get stopped on average, right? If we can look at it like that, then a white person, we're looking at a systematic constitutional violation that's been allowed to continue for over a decade. That we've been tracking it, right?
Well, it is more complicated than that.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
If one of the biggest complications is that if officers are obligated to patrol high crime areas with greater vigor than low crime areas,
right,
and those areas coincide with lower economic status, and if African Americans are known to have more problems with living in poverty than white citizens on a basis.
Sure,
which we know to be true.
Well, and
then it's
particularly defined by
that,
geographic location, though, too, right?
So we have to
Kansas
look
City,
at
St. Louis,
geographical
right.
location in terms of crime rates and
Yeah.
the way police forces are deployed to be able to tease out those things. And that's one of the reasons we like to look at the consent searches. I mean, it's important to look at the stops and say, wow.
Right.
But it's when you begin to realize some of the intricacies that make that, it doesn't really, it gets your attention, but it doesn't let you put your finger on what exactly is wrong. And I think you're a lot closer to put your finger on what's wrong if you look at things like the consent searches.
Right, right. You know, and as I looked at some of the data from around the state, and it was pretty interesting that it seems like almost wherever you go, if you're a person of color, you're going to be subject to more stops than a white person. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's generally true.
Yeah.
That I'd have to look specifically at, I mean, what happens if you're in, I'm trying to think of some little out-of-the-way place. Kirksville, say.
Right, right.
Or Moberly.
Moberly, yeah, yeah.
But I think generally that there is it's something that's there, it's everywhere. And that's something that we're in a situation where for years we had to listen to these whiny blacks complain about how unfairly they were treated.
Right.
And obviously they're just telling stories here. Nobody can prove that stuff.
Right.
So let's gather some data and see. And now we've got the data, and it's clear they're not just making up the anecdotes.
Right.
Now that puts the ball back on the public policy court of saying, well, exactly why is it these disparities exist? Which one of them can we rule out as being, say, related to geography or economic status instead of bias, and that allows us to, look a little bit closer at it.
Right.
And then we come down to situations where there just isn't much besides latent bias, unconscious bias, that's left as an explanation.
Right.
Still, you don't have anything that approaches absolute proof on this,
right.
which is awfully difficult to get to, but you're getting to something that's awfully convincing that there's, especially given the heritage of discrimination based on skin color, that we know from a fact, from our history of 400 years as a growing to be a nation, is there. It's sure not hard to, at least from my point of view, to entertain the notion that, there's some stereotypes about minorities here that are in play, right. And we're on the verge of getting past that. Kids don't see a problem with color. Kids don't understand why their parents are
doing so much better, hung up on some of this history. Yeah.
It's going to be gone in another generation, but we could make it be gone right now.
That's right. That's right.
All we have to do is sit down and treat each other as human beings, and we can, be so close to closing the door on that.
Yeah. Amen.
Wouldn't that be something to celebrate?
It sure would. It sure would. And hopefully we'll get there together. That concludes another segment of the Rod Chappell Show. We've been talking today about racial profiling, its profound effect on society that can reach as far as high-level constitutional considerations about what it is to be an American, all the way to real-life implications that can end up with a person being in jail or dead. And it all boils down to how we treat each other as people. Thanks for joining us.